Welcome to Drift Off. Tonight I'd like to invite you on a gentle journey back to post-war Britain, to a city of docks and warehouses, of terraced streets, of shipyards, rain, church bells, and music drifting from radios and record players. A city called Liverpool. And somewhere among those streets, 4 young men were growing up who would one day become the most famous band in the world. Not through a grand plan, not through instant success, but through friendship, practice, opportunity, long nights, and a series of moments that slowly changed music history. As you settle comfortably, allow your shoulders to soften. Allow your breathing to become a little slower. There's nothing to memorize tonight, nothing to study, nothing you need to hold tightly in your mind. The story can simply move quietly past. And if sleep arrives before we reach the end, you are welcome to follow it. For now, imagine Liverpool in the 1950s. Ships resting in the docks, seagulls calling above the water, teenagers listening closely to new sounds arriving from across the Atlantic, and history beginning quietly in the hands of young men with guitars. Liverpool had long been one of Britain's great port cities. Ships arrived from across the world, and with them came more than cargo. They brought records, rhythms, voices, styles, ideas, American rock and roll, rhythm and blues, country, and skiffle, all found eager listeners among young people in Britain. One of those listeners was John Lennon. John was sharp, funny, restless, and drawn to performance. As a teenager, he formed a skiffle group called the Quarrymen. At first, they were just a local group, playing small events, learning songs, finding their way. No one listening could have known that this small beginning would lead to something extraordinary. In July 1957, John Lennon met Paul McCartney at a church fete in Walton, Liverpool. Paul was younger than John, but already musically confident. He could play the guitar. He knew songs. He understood chords. and he had a natural musical gift. John was impressed. Soon Paul joined the Quarrymen. It was one of those meetings that seems ordinary in the moment. Two people brought together by music. Yet looking back, it became one of the most important meetings in popular culture. Because something in their partnership worked. John had wit, edge, and energy. Paul had melody, discipline, and musical instinct. Together, they began to sharpen each other. Not long afterwards, Paul introduced John to another young guitarist, George Harrison. George was even younger, quiet, focused, and already highly skilled. At first, John thought he might be too young, but George could play, really play. And slowly he became part of the group. Now 3 future Beatles were together. John, Paul, and George. Travelling with guitars, learning from records, improving whenever they had the chance. They were still young, still local, still searching for their sound, but the shape of something important was beginning to appear. One of the most important chapters in the Beatles story happened not in Liverpool, but in Hamburg, Germany. In 1960, the group began travelling there to perform in clubs. The work was demanding. They played long sets, late nights, sometimes for many hours at a time. The conditions were difficult, but the effect was powerful. Hamburg turned them into a real performing band. They learned stamina, timing, confidence, how to hold an audience, how to keep playing even when they were tired. During this period, the group included John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Stuart Sutcliffe on bass, and Pete Best on drums. Stuart Sutcliffe later left the group to pursue art, and Paul eventually became the bassist. Pete Best continued as drummer for a time. By the time the Beatles returned from Hamburg, they were no longer just enthusiastic young musicians. They had become sharper, more professional. Back in Liverpool, the Beatles began drawing larger audiences, especially at the Cavern Club, a small underground venue with brick walls, low ceilings, and a warm, crowded atmosphere. They performed there many times. Word spread. The excitement grew. And eventually, a local record shop owner named Brian Epstein came to see them. Brian immediately recognized something unusual. The band had energy, humor, musical instinct, and a connection with audiences that felt different from other groups. He became their manager. His influence was crucial. He helped refine their image, secured opportunities, and guided them toward the recording industry. In 1962, the Beatles secured a recording contract with EMI's Parlophone label. Their producer was George Martin. Martin was intelligent, musically trained, and open-minded. He understood that the group had something special, even if it was not yet fully formed. Around this time, another major change happened. Pete Best was replaced as drummer. In August 1962, Ringo Starr joined the Beatles. Ringo had already been performing with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes and was well known in Liverpool music circles. His arrival completed the classic Beatles lineup: John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Ringo Starr. 4 very different personalities. 4 musicians whose chemistry would soon become famous around the world. Later, in 1962, they released their first single, Love Me Do. It was not yet the sound of global domination, but it was the beginning, a first step, a signal that something was moving. By 1963, the Beatles' popularity in Britain began to rise rapidly. Then it became something far larger. Crowds gathered outside theatres. Fans screamed at performances. Newspapers followed their movements. The word Beatlemania was used to describe the excitement surrounding them. It seemed to grow wherever they went. Songs climbed the charts. Television appearances brought them into homes across the country. Their humour made them feel fresh and likeable. Their music felt bright, energetic, and new. Britain had seen popular singers before, but this felt different. It was not just admiration. It was a cultural wave. And soon, that wave crossed the Atlantic. In February 1964, the Beatles travelled to the United States. Their appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show was watched by millions. For many Americans, this was the first time they truly encountered the band. The impact was immediate. The Beatles became international stars. Their arrival helped launch what became known as the British invasion, as other British groups also found success in America. But the Beatles were at the centre of it. They represented youth, energy, change, a new sound moving through a new age. Television helped carry them everywhere. Radio helped carry them further. And within a remarkably short time, 4 young men from Liverpool were known around the world. Yet the Beatles were not important simply because they were famous. Many artists became famous, but far fewer change what music can be. As the 1960s continued, the Beatles became increasingly experimental. They moved beyond straightforward live performance. They used the recording studio as a creative space. With George Martin and the engineers around them, they explored new sounds, new instruments, tape effects, unusual arrangements, and more ambitious album making. Their work helped shift expectations. Albums could be more than a collection of songs. They could be artistic statements. They could have atmosphere, shape, and identity. The band's curiosity helped expand the possibilities of popular music. The Beatles were also part of the wider story of the 1960s. A decade of rapid cultural change. Fashion was changing. Technology was changing. Youth culture was becoming more visible and more powerful. And the Beatles somehow seemed to stand at the centre of that changing world. They were not politicians or rulers. They were not trying to write laws. But culture has its own kind of power. Music can travel across borders. It can shape memories. It can give people a sense of belonging to a particular moment in time. And for many people, the Beatles became the sound of that moment. The Beatles didn't last forever. By the late 1960s, the band were growing in different directions. They had spent years under enormous pressure, recording, touring, filming, being watched by the world. By 1970, the band had ended. John, Paul, George and Ringo went on to separate lives and careers. But the story didn't end in 1970. The music continued. The recordings remained. New generations discovered them. Musicians learned from them. And the Beatles became not only a band from the 1960s, but a permanent part of cultural history. Perhaps what makes the Beatles story so remarkable is not just the fame, it's how unlikely it all seemed. A few boys in Liverpool, a skiffle group, a meeting at a church fete, a young guitarist joining through a friend, long nights in Hamburg, crowded shows at the Cavern Club, a manager who believed, a producer who listened, a new drummer arriving at just the right time. And then somehow, the world changed. And now, our journey begins to slow. Imagine Liverpool once more. The docks resting quietly beneath the night sky. The streets calm. The lights reflecting softly on the water. Somewhere, music drifts faintly from an open window. Gentle. The crowds have gone home. The stage lights have dimmed. The city is quiet now. And perhaps your own thoughts are becoming quieter too. There's nothing more you need to follow tonight. Nothing more you need to understand. Nothing more you need to carry. The story has already done its work. You are safe, comfortable, supported. You are allowed to let go. You are allowed to become sleepy. You are allowed to drift. The city grows quieter. The music grows softer. The night grows deeper. And you can simply rest. And if you'd like another sleepy history journey, there'll always be one waiting for you here. Good night, my friends.